The day Dominic Walsh carried a half-dead woman into Helena, Montana territory, through a blizzard in late November of 1878. No one thought she would survive the night, and those who saw her face whispered she was not worth saving anyway. Snow swirled around the broad-shouldered cowboy as he kicked open the door to Doc Morrison's office, the woman limp in his arms, her breathing shallow and ragged. Dominic had found her 3 miles outside town, collapsed beside a broken wagon wheel, her face so badly scarred from what looked like an old burn that even he had hesitated for a moment before lifting her onto his horse. That hesitation shamed him now as he laid her gently on the examining table. "Good Lord," Doc Morrison muttered, rushing forward with his medical bag. The old physician's weathered hands moved efficiently, checking her pulse, her breathing, peeling back the torn fabric of her dress to reveal bruises and cuts. "What happened to her?" "Do not know," Dominic said, his voice rough from the cold wind. "Found her out on the eastern road. Wagon looked like it had been ransacked. No sign of anyone else." The doctor worked in silence for a moment, then shook his head. "She is badly dehydrated and half frozen. Even if I can bring her back from this, I do not know what life she will have." He gestured vaguely toward her face, and Dominic felt anger flare in his chest at the implication. "Just save her," Dominic said firmly. "That is all that matters right now." Word spread quickly through Helena, as it always did in towns where entertainment was scarce and gossip was currency. By the time Dominic left the doctor's office 2 hours later, assured that the woman would likely survive the night, half the town seemed to know about the scarred stranger he had brought in from the storm. He caught the whispers as he walked to the boarding house where he kept a room between cattle drives. "Did you see her face? Poor thing would have been better off dying out there." Why would Walsh even bother? Dominic clenched his jaw and kept walking. He had lived 28 years on this earth, the last 15 working cattle drives from Texas to Montana, and he had seen enough cruelty disguised as concern to recognize it immediately. People liked to pretend their prejudices were kindness, that their rejection was somehow mercy. He returned to the doctor's office the next morning with fresh clothes he had purchased from the general store, not sure what size to buy, but guessing as best he could. The woman was awake, sitting propped against pillows, her green eyes startling in their clarity and life despite the twisted skin that covered the left side of her face and neck. "You are the one who found me," she said. Her voice was low and musical, surprising him. "Yes, madam. Dominic Walsh." He held out the bundle of clothes awkwardly. "Thought you might need these. Your dress was pretty torn up." She took the bundle with trembling hands. "Grace Thompson, thank you for saving my life, Mr. Walsh. Just Dominic is fine." He shifted his weight, uncomfortable with gratitude that felt too heavy. "What happened out there?" Grace's expression darkened. "I was traveling from Fort Benton to meet my cousin in Helena. The driver I hired seemed respectable enough at first, but 2 days into the journey, his intentions became clear. When I refused his advances, he became violent. We struggled, and I managed to escape the wagon, but he took everything, my belongings, my money, left me there to die." Her hand unconsciously moved to touch the scarred side of her face. "He said no one would care anyway, that I should be grateful anyone would want me." Rage burned through Dominic's veins, white-hot and fierce. "Did you get his name?" He called himself Jim Barker, but I doubt that was real. Doc Morrison entered the room, nodding at Dominic before examining Grace's wounds. "You are remarkably fortunate, Miss Thompson. Another few hours in that cold would have killed you. As it is, you should make a full recovery, though you will need to rest for at least a week before traveling." "I have nowhere to go," Grace said quietly, "and no money to pay you for your services. We will figure something out. the doctor said kindly, though Dominic noticed the slight hesitation, the way his eyes skipped over Grace's scars. Over the next week, Dominic found himself visiting the doctor's office more frequently than strictly necessary. He told himself he was just checking on Grace's recovery, making sure she had everything she needed, but the truth settled into his bones with uncomfortable certainty. He enjoyed her company. Grace was sharp-witted and well-read, surprising him with knowledge of literature and history that far exceeded his own rough education. She had been a schoolteacher in St. Louis before the fire that scarred her 3 years ago, an accident in the schoolhouse that had left 2 students dead, and Grace permanently marked. "I tried to keep teaching after I healed," she told him one afternoon, sitting in a chair by the window while he kept her company. "But the parents complained. They said I frightened the children, that my appearance was disturbing. The school board let me go as gently as they could, but the message was clear. I was no longer fit to be seen." "That is cruel and stupid," Dominic said bluntly. "You being scarred does not change your ability to teach," Grace smiled, a sad but genuine expression. "You would think that, would you not? But people see what they want to see. They look at me and see only ugliness, only something to pity or turn away from." She met his eyes directly. "You are one of the few who looks at me and seems to see an actual person." "Then most people are fools," Dominic replied. By the time Doc Morrison declared Grace well enough to leave his care, Dominic had made a decision that surprised even himself. He found her sitting on the office steps, her few belongings in a small bag beside her, staring out at the muddy street with an expression of lost determination. "Where will you go?" he asked. She shrugged. "I suppose I will try to find work, perhaps as a laundress or cook. Something where my face will not offend the customers too much." "I have a different idea," Dominic said, his heart pounding. "Marry me." Grace's eyes widened. "What?" "I know it sounds crazy," he continued quickly, sitting down beside her, "but think about it. I have a good piece of land about 10 miles from here, a ranch I have been building up for the past 3 years. It is not much yet, but it has potential. I need help running it, and you need a home and protection. We could help each other." "You want to marry me out of pity," Grace said, her voice flat. "No," Dominic said firmly. "I want to marry you because in the past week I have enjoyed your company more than anyone else I have met in years, because you are intelligent and strong and kind. Because when I think about going back to that ranch alone, it feels emptier than it did before." He took a breath. "I am not saying I am in love with you. I barely know you. But I like you, Grace Thompson, and I think we could build something good together if you are willing to try." She was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with those keen green eyes. "Why do you not care about my scars?" "I do care," Dominic said honestly. "I care that they hurt you, that they were used as an excuse to treat you poorly, but they do not change who you are. They do not make you less worthy of respect or companionship or happiness." He met her gaze steadily. "I have seen a lot of ugliness in this world, Grace, and most of it has nothing to do with how people look on the outside." Grace's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I do not want to be anyone's burden." "You would not be. I am offering a partnership, not charity. You would have your own space, your own life. If affection grows between us, good. If not, we will still have companionship and mutual support. That is more than a lot of marriages start with." She laughed softly, wiping at her eyes. "This is insane." "Probably," Dominic agreed. "But is it any more insane than wandering into an uncertain future with no resources and no prospects? You make a compelling argument, Mr. Walsh. So, is that a yes?" Grace looked at him for a long moment, then held out her hand. "Yes, Dominic Walsh, I will marry you." They were married 3 days later by the traveling preacher who happened to be passing through Helena. The ceremony took place in the small church on Main Street, with only Doc Morrison and his wife as witnesses. Dominic could not help but notice the way Mrs. Morrison's eyes kept drifting to Grace's scars, the slight tightness around her mouth that spoke of disapproval disguised as concern. "Are you certain about this, Mr. Walsh?" the preacher asked quietly before the ceremony began. "Marriage is a sacred commitment." "I am certain," Dominic replied, his voice harder than he intended. Grace wore a simple blue dress, also purchased from the general store, and she held a small bouquet of dried flowers that Mrs. Morrison had reluctantly provided. When Dominic took her hand during the vows, he felt her trembling slightly and gave her fingers a gentle squeeze of reassurance. "I, Dominic Walsh, take you, Grace Thompson, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said clearly, his eyes on hers. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." Grace's voice was steady as she repeated her vows, and when the preacher declared them married, Dominic leaned down and kissed her cheek gently, careful to kiss the scarred side, a deliberate choice that made Grace's breath catch. They left Helena the next morning in Dominic's wagon, heading west toward his ranch. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, rolling hills covered in dying grass, mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. Grace sat beside him on the wagon seat, wrapped in a thick wool coat, her eyes taking in everything with quiet wonder. "Tell me about your ranch," she said. "It is about 300 acres, Dominic replied, guiding the horses along the rutted road. "I have a small herd of cattle, maybe 50 head right now, and a few horses. The house is not fancy, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it is solid. I built most of it myself." He glanced at her. "There is a lot of work to do. The ranch will not run itself, and I cannot afford to hire help yet." "I am not afraid of hard work," Grace said. "I grew up on a farm in Illinois. I know how to milk cows, tend chickens, and keep a garden. I can cook and clean and mend. Whatever you need, I will learn." "I believe you," Dominic said, and meant it. They reached the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The house was small, as Dominic had warned, but it looked sturdy and well-maintained. A barn stood nearby, and Dominic could see his few cattle grazing in the distance, dark shapes against the dimming landscape. "It is beautiful," Grace said softly. Dominic helped her down from the wagon, and together they unloaded her few belongings. Inside, the house was sparse but clean. The main room held a stone fireplace, a table with 2 chairs, a small stove for cooking, and some basic shelves. A door led to the bedroom, which contained a bed, a dresser, and little else. "I will sleep in the loft," Dominic said, gesturing to the ladder leading to the small space above. "You can have the bedroom." Grace looked at him with an unreadable expression. "We are married, Dominic. I know, but I meant what I said about giving you your own space. When you are ready for more, if you ever are, you can let me know." Something softened in Grace's face. "You are a good man." "I try to be." They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Dominic rose before dawn to tend the animals and work on expanding the fences. Grace proved to be as capable as she had claimed, managing the household with efficient competence and even helping with the outdoor work when needed. She cooked hearty meals that filled the house with warmth and delicious smells, mended his worn clothes with neat stitches, and kept the place cleaner than it had been in years. But more than that, they talked. In the evenings, after the work was done, they would sit by the fire and share stories of their lives. Dominic told her about growing up in Texas, the son of a ranch hand who died when Dominic was 12, leaving him to make his own way in the world. He spoke of the long cattle drives, the harsh winters, the loneliness that seemed to seep into his bones despite being surrounded by other cowboys. Grace shared her own history, her childhood on the farm, her determination to become a teacher, the joy she had found in educating young minds. She spoke about the fire with halting words, describing the terror of seeing flames consume the schoolhouse, the desperate scramble to save the children, the searing pain as burning wood fell on her. "I saved most of them," she said quietly one night, her fingers absently tracing the scarred skin on her neck. "But 2 little girls were trapped in the back room. I tried, Dominic. I tried so hard to reach them, but the flames were too fierce. By the time help arrived, they were gone, and I looked like this." "You are a hero," Dominic said fiercely. "You risked your life trying to save those children." Their parents did not see it that way. They blamed me for the fire starting, even though it was faulty wiring. They said if I had been more vigilant, their daughters would still be alive. Grace's voice cracked. "Maybe they were right. They were wrong," Dominic said, moving closer to her on the bench. He took her hand carefully, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not. "You did everything you could. The guilt you carry, that is natural, but it is not deserved. Those girls died because of an accident, not because of anything you did or did not do." Grace leaned against his shoulder, and he put his arm around her carefully. They sat like that for a long time, watching the fire burn low, and Dominic realized with startling clarity that his feelings for his wife were deepening into something far beyond respect and companionship. Winter arrived in full force in December, bringing heavy snows that isolated them on the ranch for days at a time. Dominic worried about the cattle, but Grace proved invaluable, helping him dig paths to the barn, feeding the animals when the cold made his fingers too numb to work properly, even assisting when a difficult calving required 2 pairs of hands. One particularly bitter night, with wind howling around the house and snow piling against the walls, Dominic came in from checking the barn to find Grace brewing hot coffee, her face flushed from the heat of the stove. "You should not have gone out in this," she scolded gently, handing him a steaming cup. "It is too dangerous." "The animals needed checking," Dominic said, his teeth chattering. Even his heavy coat had not been enough to keep out the penetrating cold. Grace frowned at him, then made a decision. "Take off those wet clothes before you catch your death. I will heat some water for you to wash with." He obeyed, stripping down to his underclothes while she busied herself at the stove, heating water in a large pot. When it was ready, she poured it into the basin and turned away to give him privacy, but Dominic caught her hand. "Grace," he said softly, "you do not have to always look away." She met his eyes, and he saw uncertainty there, mixed with something else. Hope, perhaps. "I do not want to presume anything. You are my wife," Dominic said, "and somewhere along the way you became someone I care about deeply, someone I think about constantly, someone whose smile makes my whole day better." He took a breath. "I am falling in love with you, Grace." "Maybe I already have fallen. I wanted to give you time, let you set the pace, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel this way." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "How can you love me? When you look at me, you see this." She gestured to her scarred face. "When I look at you, I see courage," Dominic said, cupping her face gently in both hands, his thumbs stroking both the smooth and scarred skin with equal tenderness. "I see intelligence and kindness. I see a woman who makes me laugh, who works beside me without complaint, who has made this house feel like a home. I see someone beautiful, Grace, inside and out. The scars are just part of your story, not the whole of who you are." "I am falling in love with you too," Grace whispered. "I have been trying not to, trying to protect myself in case you realized you made a mistake marrying me, but I cannot help it. You make me feel seen in a way I have not felt since before the fire. You make me feel like I matter." "You do matter," Dominic said, and then he kissed her, truly kissed her for the first time since their wedding day. Grace melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, and the kiss deepened with months of restrained longing finally released. That night, Dominic did not sleep in the loft. He held Grace in the bedroom they now shared, her head on his chest, his fingers running through her long brown hair, and felt a completeness he had never experienced before. This was what he had been missing all those lonely years on the trail. This connection, this intimacy, this sense of belonging to another person and having them belong to him in return. "I never thought I would have this," Grace murmured against his skin. "After the fire, I thought I was destined to be alone forever." "You will never be alone again," Dominic promised. "I will stand beside you for as long as I live." The winter slowly gave way to early spring, and with the thawing snow came unexpected trouble. Dominic had ridden into Helena for supplies, leaving Grace to manage the ranch for the day. When he returned in the late afternoon, he found her in the barn, her dress torn, a bruise forming on her cheek, standing over an unconscious man with a heavy piece of wood in her hands. "Grace!" Dominic leaped from his horse, running to her. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I am fine," she said, though her hands were shaking. "This man rode in about an hour ago. He said he was looking for work, but when I told him to come back when you were here, he tried to grab me. We fought, and I hit him with that board." Dominic looked at the unconscious man and felt cold recognition settle in his gut. "Grace, is this the man who left you to die? The driver from last fall?" She looked closer, then nodded, her face paling. "Yes, that is Jim Barker, or whatever his real name is." Dominic tied the man securely and then went to comfort his wife, holding her as reaction set in and she began to tremble. "You are safe now. I am here. He will not hurt you again." When Barker woke, Dominic was standing over him, his expression hard. "You made a big mistake coming here." "I did not know this was your place," Barker said, trying for bravado despite his bound hands. "I was just looking for work." "You were looking for my wife," Dominic corrected coldly. "The same woman you robbed and left to die last November." Barker's eyes widened as he looked at Grace, clearly not recognizing her at first, then laughing harshly. "That scarred wretch. You married her. I did you a favor leaving her out there." Dominic's fist connected with Barker's jaw before he could think about it, the satisfying crack of bone on bone echoing through the barn. "You will speak respectfully about my wife, or I will do worse than tie you up." They took Barker to Helena the next morning, delivering him to the sheriff with Grace's full testimony about what he had done. The sheriff, a weathered man named Tom Porter, listened carefully and then locked Barker in a cell. "We have been looking for this fellow," Porter said. "He has been running the same scheme across 3 territories, hiring on as a driver and then robbing his passengers. You are the first to survive and identify him, Miss Walsh," he caught himself. "Mrs. Walsh, I mean." "Will there be a trial?" Grace asked. "Most likely. With your testimony and the other evidence we have been gathering, he should see justice done." As they left the sheriff's office, Dominic noticed the stares following them, the whispers. Grace held her head high, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. In the general store, the owner's wife made a show of moving her young daughter away from Grace, as if scars were contagious. "Perhaps we should go," Grace said quietly, her eyes fixed on the floor. "Not yet," Dominic said firmly. He raised his voice, addressing the store at large. "My wife and I need supplies, and we will be treated with the same respect as any other customers. If that is a problem for anyone, they can take it up with me outside." Silence fell. The store owner, a portly man named Mr. Hendricks, cleared his throat. "Of course, Mr. Walsh. What can I get for you?" As they conducted their business, Dominic kept his hand on the small of Grace's back, a protective and possessive gesture. He met every stare with a challenging look of his own until people turned away. By the time they left with their supplies, he was satisfied that his message had been delivered clearly. "You did not have to do that," Grace said as they loaded the wagon. "Yes, I did. You are my wife, and I will not tolerate anyone treating you as less than you are." Grace kissed him right there on the street in front of anyone who cared to watch. "I love you, Dominic Walsh. I love you too." Spring turned to summer, and the ranch began to truly thrive under their combined efforts. Grace's organizational skills and Dominic's ranching knowledge made them an effective team. They increased their cattle herd, improved their water systems, and even started a vegetable garden that produced more than enough for their needs, allowing them to sell surplus in town. The town's attitude toward Grace slowly began to shift, largely due to Dominic's unwavering support and Grace's own quiet competence. When a fever swept through Helena in July, Grace volunteered to help nurse the sick, her teaching background making her adept at following Doc Morrison's instructions. She worked tirelessly for 2 weeks, helping to save several lives, and by the time the fever passed, even the most prejudiced townspeople had to acknowledge her worth. "You have won them over," Dominic observed one evening as they relaxed on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "Not all of them," Grace replied, "but enough that I feel less like a pariah and more like an actual member of the community." "Does it matter to you what they think?" Grace considered this. "Less than it used to. I have you, and I have purpose, and I have a home. The rest is just noise." She smiled at him. "But it is nice to be treated like a human being again. I would be lying if I said otherwise." In October, Grace told Dominic she was pregnant. He was out mending a fence when she brought him lunch, her face glowing with a secret she could barely contain. "I have news," she said, setting down the basket of food. "Good news, I hope, judging by that smile. I think so. I hope you will too." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Around April, Doc Morrison thinks." Dominic felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Grace, that is wonderful. That is more than wonderful." He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully, overwhelmed with joy and a new kind of fear. "Are you healthy? Is everything as it should be?" "The doctor says I am perfectly fine." "Strong as an ox," he said, "though I am not sure I appreciate the comparison." She laughed, then grew more serious. "Are you truly happy about this? I know we have not talked about children much." "I am happier than I can say," Dominic assured her. "A child, our child." It is almost too much to believe. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter months. Dominic became almost comically protective, insisting Grace rest more, not lift heavy things, bundle up warmly whenever she went outside. Grace tolerated his hovering with patient amusement, assuring him repeatedly that she was fine. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him when he fretted about her walking to the barn. "I am not fragile. I know. I just want to keep you safe, both of you." Their son was born on a rainy April evening in 1880, delivered by Doc Morrison with Dominic pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door. When he finally heard the baby's cry, strong and healthy, he nearly collapsed with relief. Doc Morrison emerged a few minutes later, grinning. "You have a fine boy, Walsh. Both mother and child are doing well. You can go in now." Dominic entered the room to find Grace propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "We have a son," she whispered. Dominic sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking down at the small red face, the tiny hands waving aimlessly, and felt his world shift on its axis. "He is perfect. What should we name him?" Grace asked. They had discussed names for months, never quite settling on one. Now, looking at his son, Dominic knew. "Daniel, after my father." "Daniel Walsh," Grace said, testing the name. "I like it. Daniel Thomas Walsh. Thomas, after your maiden name, if that is all right with you." "It is perfect," Dominic said, and carefully took his son into his arms for the first time. The years that followed were full and rich, marked by hard work, deep love, and growing prosperity. The ranch expanded steadily. Dominic hired 2 hands to help with the cattle, and Grace managed the household and the books with skillful efficiency. Little Daniel grew into a sturdy, cheerful boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. In the summer of 1882, Grace gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Deanne. She was smaller than Daniel had been, but just as healthy, and she inherited Grace's brown hair and Dominic's blue eyes, a striking combination. Daniel, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. The townspeople of Helena had long since accepted Grace as one of their own. She became involved in the community, helping to establish a proper school and even teaching occasionally when the regular teacher needed assistance. Her scars were now just a familiar part of who she was to the people who knew her, unremarkable in the face of her contributions and character. One afternoon in the fall of 1883, Dominic came in from the fields to find Grace sitting at the table, reading a letter with tears in her eyes. He immediately crossed to her, concerned. "What is wrong? Bad news?" "No," Grace said, wiping her eyes. "Good news, actually. Amazing news. This letter is from the parents of one of the children I saved from the schoolhouse fire. They finally found me through some inquiries." She looked up at him. "They wanted me to know that their daughter, who I pulled from the building that day, is now studying to be a teacher herself. They said she was inspired by my courage and wanted to honor my sacrifice by following in my footsteps." Grace's voice broke. "They thanked me, Dominic. After all these years of believing I had failed, of carrying the guilt of the 2 who died, these parents reminded me that I saved 8 children that day. 8 lives that continued because I acted." Dominic knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "You are a hero, Grace. I have always known it, and I am glad those parents had the decency to tell you what you deserved to hear years ago." "I wasted so much time hating myself," Grace said. "So much time believing I was worthless because of these scars, because of those deaths." "But you do not believe that anymore, do you?" Grace looked at him, then at the open doorway where Daniel and Diane were playing in the yard, their laughter floating in on the breeze. "No. How can I when I have all this? When I have you and our children and this beautiful life we have built together?" "Then those years were not wasted," Dominic said gently. "They brought you here, to me, to us. I would not change a thing." In 1885, their 3rd child was born, another boy they named David. He was the largest of their babies, nearly 9 pounds, and had a lusty cry that announced his presence to the entire ranch. Daniel, now 5, and Diane, almost 3, were delighted with their new brother and competed to help care for him. The ranch had grown into one of the most successful in the region, with over 200 head of cattle and a reputation for quality stock. Dominic had expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper parlor, giving them space to accommodate their growing family. Grace had turned part of the barn into a small classroom, where she taught not only their children, but also several children from neighboring ranches, fulfilling her calling as an educator in a new way. One evening, as they sat on the expanded porch watching the sunset, Dominic reflected on how much had changed since that snowy November day in 1878 when he had carried a half-dead stranger into town. "What are you thinking about?" Grace asked, leaning against his shoulder. "About how different my life might have been if I had ridden a different road that day. If I had not found you. Do you ever regret it, marrying me on such short acquaintance, taking on someone everyone said was worthless?" Dominic turned to face her fully, cupping her scarred face in his hands as he had done countless times over the years. "Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Grace Walsh. You gave me love, children, purpose, and partnership. You made me better than I was. If anything, I am the one who should be grateful you took a chance on a rough cowboy with nothing to offer but a small ranch and a promise." "You offered me everything I needed," Grace said softly. "Respect, protection, a home, and eventually love. You saw me when the world wanted to look away. You believed in me when no one else did. And you became my greatest strength," Dominic said. "My partner in every sense. I could not have built this ranch, this life, without you beside me." Grace kissed him, a long, sweet kiss filled with years of shared history and enduring love. From inside the house came the sounds of their children, Daniel reading a story to his younger siblings, their voices a comforting backdrop to the evening. "We did well, did we not?" Grace said. "We did better than well. We built something beautiful." The years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of ranch life. Seasons turned, children grew, and the love between Dominic and Grace deepened into something unshakable. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, cattle rustlers and economic downturns, always facing challenges together with the same partnership that had defined their marriage from the beginning. In the summer of 1888, when Daniel was 8, Diane was 6, and David was 3, Grace announced she was pregnant again. This time, there were no complications, no worries. They had done this 3 times before and knew what to expect. Their 4th child, another daughter they named Dorothy, was born in February of 1889. A tiny, delicate baby with wispy blonde hair and gray eyes that would eventually turn hazel. The children grew up surrounded by love and security, taught by both parents to judge people by their character rather than their appearance, to work hard, to treat others with respect, and to stand up against injustice. They knew their mother's scars were from an act of heroism, not something to be ashamed of, and they learned early to defend her against anyone who dared speak unkindly. One incident stood out in Dominic's memory. Daniel was 10 years old, in town with his mother to buy supplies, when a stranger made a cruel comment about Grace's appearance. Before Grace could respond, Daniel stepped forward, his young voice strong and clear. "That is my mother you are insulting. She got those scars saving children from a fire. What have you ever done that was brave enough to leave a mark?" The stranger had backed down, embarrassed, and Grace had hugged her son fiercely, pride shining in her eyes. When they returned to the ranch and told Dominic what had happened, he had to wipe away tears of his own pride. "You raised him right," he told Grace that night. "We raised him right," she corrected. "You showed him how a man treats the woman he loves. That was the example he follows." As Montana Territory moved toward statehood, which would come in 1889, the ranch continued to prosper. Dominic had become a respected figure in the community, often consulted on matters of livestock management and land use. Grace's school had grown to serve more than a dozen children from surrounding ranches, and she had successfully lobbied for better educational resources for rural areas. In 1892, when Dominic was 42 and Grace was 38, they celebrated 14 years of marriage with a rare trip alone, leaving the children in the care of their trusted ranch hands and traveling to Virginia City for a weekend. It was a second honeymoon of sorts, a chance to reconnect as a couple rather than just parents and business partners. "You remember our wedding?" Grace asked as they walked through the streets of the old mining town. "Every moment. You were so nervous, and I was terrified you would realize what a mistake you were making and run. I was more afraid you would wake up one day and regret choosing me." Dominic stopped walking, turning to face her. "Grace, I want you to hear this clearly. I have never, not for one instant, regretted marrying you. You are the love of my life, the mother of my children, my partner, my best friend, my everything. If I had the chance to go back and choose differently, I would choose you every single time." Grace's eyes glistened. "I love you so much, Dominic Walsh, more than I thought it was possible to love another person. And I love you, Grace Walsh. Always have, always will." They renewed their vows in a small church in Virginia City, just the two of them and a kind minister who smiled at their obvious devotion. It felt right, making those promises again with full knowledge of what they meant, with years of proof that they could keep them. The journey home was leisurely, both of them reluctant to return to the demands of ranch and family, though they missed the children. They stopped to camp under the stars, something they had not done since the early days of their marriage, and made love with the tenderness of long familiarity and the passion of enduring desire. "I cannot imagine my life without you," Grace whispered in the darkness, her head on Dominic's chest. "You will never have to," he promised. "We have many more years ahead of us." Back at the ranch, life resumed its familiar pattern, but something had shifted. The renewal of their vows, the time alone together, had reminded them both of the foundation their family was built on, their love for each other. They made more time for quiet moments together, early morning walks before the children woke, late evening conversations after everyone else was asleep. In 1894, Daniel turned 14 and began taking on more responsibility around the ranch, learning the business from his father with serious dedication. Diane, at 12, showed a remarkable talent for working with horses and spent hours in the barn training the younger animals. David, 9, was the most academically inclined, often found reading books far above his age level. Dorothy, 5, was the social butterfly, making friends wherever she went and charming everyone she met. "We have good children," Grace observed one day, watching them work together to repair a section of fence. "We do," Dominic agreed. "They will do well in this world." That fall brought unexpected news. Jim Barker, who had spent years in territorial prison for his crimes, had been released on some legal technicality. Word reached Dominic through the sheriff, who rode out to the ranch personally to warn them. "I do not think he will come here," Sheriff Porter said. "But I wanted you to know, just in case. He has been told to leave the territory, but men like that do not always follow orders." Dominic thanked the sheriff and increased security around the ranch, making sure the hands were alert and that Grace and the children stayed close to the house. For 2 weeks, tension ran high, but there was no sign of Barker. Then, on a cold October evening, Daniel came running into the house, his face pale. "Pa, there is a man watching the house from the ridge. I saw him when I was bringing the horses in." Dominic grabbed his rifle and went out cautiously, circling around to approach the ridge from behind. Sure enough, a figure sat on a horse, silhouetted against the darkening sky, looking down at the ranch. As Dominic got closer, he recognized Barker's profile. "You are on my property," Dominic called out, his rifle ready, "and you are not welcome here." Barker turned, his face twisted with bitterness. "I spent 6 years in that hellhole because of your wife. 6 years of my life gone." "You spent 6 years in prison because you robbed and assaulted people," Dominic corrected coldly. My wife simply made sure you faced justice for it. Now leave, before I give you a reason to go back." "I just wanted to see what you built here," Barker said, gesturing at the ranch below. "All this with that ugly woman. It is unnatural." Dominic's finger tightened on the trigger, rage flooding through him. "My wife is worth 100 of you. Now you have two choices. Ride out of here peacefully, or I will shoot you for trespassing. Your decision." For a long moment, Barker stared at him, weighing his options. Then, with a final sneer, he turned his horse and rode away into the gathering darkness. Dominic watched until he was certain the man was gone, then returned to the house where Grace was waiting, her face drawn with worry. "Is he gone?" "Yes, and he will not be back. I made sure he understood that." Dominic pulled her close. "You are safe. Our family is safe." That was the last they ever saw of Jim Barker. Sheriff Porter later informed them that the man had been arrested in another territory for trying to run the same scheme and had been sent to a federal prison. The threat was finally, truly over. Life settled back into its comfortable rhythm. The children continued to grow, each finding their own path. Daniel fell in love with a neighboring rancher's daughter, a strong young woman named Sarah, who won Grace's approval immediately. They married in 1898, when Daniel was 18 and Sarah was 19, and began building their own ranch on land Dominic helped them purchase. Diane surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to study veterinary medicine, inspired by years of working with the ranch animals. It was an unusual choice for a woman, but with her parents' support and determination, she gained admission to a veterinary program in Oregon, becoming one of the first female veterinarians in the region when she graduated in 1903. David pursued his academic interests, eventually becoming a teacher himself, carrying on his mother's legacy of education. He taught in Helena, close enough to visit regularly, and married a fellow teacher, a quiet woman named Elizabeth who shared his love of learning. Dorothy, the youngest, proved to have her mother's organizational skills and her father's business sense. She took over managing much of the ranch's financial matters and correspondence as she grew older, becoming invaluable to the operation. She married at 22 to a banker from Helena, who respected her intelligence and independence. As the new century dawned, Dominic and Grace found themselves in their 50s, their children grown and settled, their ranch thriving beyond anything they had imagined that first desperate winter together. They had grandchildren now, Daniel and Sarah's 2 boys and a girl, and the house was often full of young voices and laughter. One spring evening in 1905, as they sat on the porch watching yet another sunset, Dominic took Grace's hand, marveling at how natural the gesture had become over 27 years of marriage. "You remember when you asked me how I could love you," he said. "How I could look past your scars." "I remember. I was so certain that physical beauty was all anyone saw, all that mattered. I hope I proved you wrong." Grace smiled, the expression crinkling the scarred skin on one side of her face, the smooth on the other, both equally dear to him. "You proved me wrong about so many things. I thought I was unlovable. I thought my life was over. I thought happiness was something that happened to other people, people who looked different than me. And now I know that real beauty, real love, has nothing to do with appearances. It is built in moments like these, in years of partnership, in choosing each other every day even when it is hard. You gave me that gift, Dominic, the gift of knowing I was worthy of love exactly as I am." "You gave me the same gift," Dominic said. "Before you, I was just drifting, going through the motions of life without really living. You gave me purpose, family, joy. You made me believe I could be more than just another cowboy trying to scrape by. We saved each other, I think. I think you are right." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. From inside the house came the sounds of their grandchildren being put to bed by Dorothy, who was visiting with her husband. The ranch hummed with life and purpose, a testament to everything they had built together. "What do you think our legacy will be?" Grace asked thoughtfully. "When we are gone and our children tell stories about us to their grandchildren, what will they remember?" Dominic considered this carefully. "I hope they remember that we loved each other truly, that we stood by each other through everything. I hope they remember that we did not let the world's prejudices define us, that we built something good despite people saying it was impossible." He squeezed her hand. "And I hope they remember that you were my greatest strength, Grace. Not because you made things easy, but because you made me better, stronger, more than I could have been alone." Grace's eyes glistened with tears. "That is beautiful. It is true." The years continued their steady march. Dominic turned 60 in 1910, Grace 56, and they celebrated with a party attended by all their children, their spouses, and their growing collection of grandchildren. The ranch was now run primarily by hired managers, with Daniel overseeing operations from his own nearby property. Dominic and Grace had earned the right to slow down, to enjoy the fruits of their decades of hard work. Grace's hair had gone completely silver, which she wore in a simple bun. The scars had faded somewhat with time but were still visible, still a part of her story. Dominic's dark hair was streaked with gray, his body bearing the marks of a lifetime of hard physical work, but he was still strong, still capable. In the summer of 1912, they celebrated their 34th wedding anniversary. Their children and grandchildren surprised them with a renewed celebration of their vows, this time in front of everyone they loved, in a meadow on the ranch property with wildflowers blooming all around. Daniel, now a father of 5 himself, stood up to speak. "My parents taught us that love is a choice you make every day, that it is built on respect, trust, and partnership. Growing up, we never doubted their devotion to each other or to us. They faced a world that told them they should not be together, that my mother was somehow less because of how she looked, but they refused to believe those lies. They built a family, a business, a community based on seeing people for who they truly are. That is their legacy, and I am proud to carry it forward." Deanne spoke next, her voice strong despite the emotion. "My mother is the bravest person I know, not because she ran into a burning building to save children, though that was incredibly brave, but because she kept going when the world tried to break her. Because she chose to love again, to trust again, to build a new life when it would have been easier to give up. And my father is brave too, for seeing past what the world valued to find what really mattered. Together, they showed us what real strength looks like." David and Dorothy added their own words of love and gratitude, and by the time they finished, Grace was openly weeping, Dominic's arm around her shoulders, his own eyes wet. "I do not deserve such wonderful children," Grace managed to say. "Yes, you do," Dominic corrected gently. "We both do. We earned them with every choice we made to love each other, to build something good, to teach them what really matters." As the party continued around them, music playing, grandchildren running through the meadow, Dominic and Grace stood apart for a moment, just the two of them amid the celebration. 34 years, Grace marveled. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like yesterday that you were carrying me into Doc Morrison's office. Best decision I ever made, finding you that day. You did not find me. You saved me." "We saved each other," Dominic said, echoing her words from years before. "And we built something beautiful from that saving." They danced as the sun set, moving slowly to the music, surrounded by the life they had created together. Grace's head rested on Dominic's shoulder, fitting perfectly as it had for decades, and he breathed in the familiar scent of her hair, feeling profound gratitude for every moment they had shared. "I would do it all again," Grace whispered. "Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of doubt. All of it to end up here with you." "As would I," Dominic replied. "1,000 times over I would choose you." The moon rose over the Montana ranch, silver light washing over the assembled family, over the house Dominic had built with his own hands, over the land they had worked together to cultivate and nurture. Inside the celebration, 3 generations of Walshes laughed and talked and lived, proof that love built on respect and true seeing could create something that endured beyond any individual life. As the party wound down and families prepared to head home or settle into guest rooms, Daniel approached his parents. "Thank you," he said simply, "for showing us how it should be done. Sarah and I try to build what you built, and I hope we are successful." "You are doing wonderfully," Grace assured him. "And the secret is simple. Choose each other every day, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. And never let the world tell you who is worth loving," Dominic added. "You decide that for yourself." Daniel hugged them both and headed back to gather his children. Deanne, David, and Dorothy all followed suit, each expressing their love and gratitude before departing. Finally, Dominic and Grace were alone on the porch of their home, stars brilliant overhead, the ranch settling into nighttime quiet. "Come to bed," Grace said softly, taking his hand. They climbed the stairs together, bodies moving slower than they once had but spirits still strong. In their bedroom, surrounded by decades of memories, they prepared for sleep with the comfortable familiarity of a lifetime together. Dominic held Grace close, her back against his chest, his arm around her waist. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I love you too," she replied, threading her fingers through his. "Until the end of everything. And beyond," he promised. They drifted into sleep together, as they had done for thousands of nights before, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The ranch house stood solid around them, filled with the ghosts of laughter and love, the echoes of children growing, of quiet evenings by the fire, of storms weathered and joys celebrated. In the years that followed, Dominic and Grace continued to live on the ranch, though their pace slowed with age. They spent their days in quieter pursuits, reading together on the porch, taking gentle walks around the property, welcoming the constant stream of visiting grandchildren. Their love, tested by time and trial, remained the foundation of everything. When Grace fell ill in the winter of 1918 with pneumonia, Dominic never left her side. He held her hand through the fever, wiped her brow, whispered words of love and encouragement. She recovered, but it took months, and both of them felt the weight of mortality settling more heavily on their shoulders. "We are getting old," Grace said one spring afternoon, finally well enough to sit outside again. "We are," Dominic agreed, "but we are getting old together." "That is what matters. Promise me something," Grace said, turning to look at him directly. "When one of us goes, the other has to keep living. Really living, not just existing. Our children and grandchildren will need us." "That is a hard promise to make," Dominic said honestly. "I cannot imagine life without you. I cannot imagine it either. But we both know the day will come. I need to know you will be all right, that you will not give up." Dominic took her hand, raising it to his lips. "I promise. As long as there is breath in my body, I will keep going. For our family, for the life we built for you. And I promise the same." They lived to see the end of World War I, the start of a new decade. Dominic turned 70 in 1920, Grace 66. Their children were now middle-aged, their grandchildren young adults starting families of their own. The Walsh Ranch had become a family legacy, with Daniel's oldest son preparing to take over primary management. On a warm summer evening in 1922, sitting on the porch they had shared for 44 years, watching another Montana sunset paint the sky in gold and rose, Grace turned to Dominic with a soft smile. "We did well, did we not?" It was the same question she had asked years before, but now it carried the weight of a lifetime of proof. "We did better than well," Dominic replied, also echoing his earlier response. "We built something beautiful." Grace leaned her silver head on his shoulder, and Dominic wrapped his arm around her, holding her close as he had done thousands of times before. They sat in perfect contentment, watching the day fade into night, surrounded by the land they had worked, the home they had built, the family they had created. "I am glad you found me that day," Grace said quietly. "Glad you did not just ride past a half-frozen woman on the road. I am glad you said yes when I asked you to marry me. Glad you took a chance on a rough cowboy with more dreams than sense. Best decision I ever made. Mine too." The stars began to emerge one by one, filling the Montana sky with light. Inside the house, they could hear Dorothy, who was visiting with her own grandchildren now, getting the little ones ready for bed. The ranch continued around them, living and breathing with the life they had built into it. "Dominic," Grace said softly. "Yes, my love. Thank you. For seeing me when no one else would. For loving me when I thought I was unlovable. For building this life with me. For every moment of these 44 years. Thank you." Dominic felt tears on his cheeks, unbothered by their presence. "It was my honor and my joy, Grace Walsh. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." They sat together under the stars, two people who had defied the world's expectations to build something true and lasting. A love story that began with an act of mercy and grew into something that transformed lives, shaped generations, created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. In the distance, a coyote called to the moon. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of summer earth and wildflowers. The ranch house stood solid and welcoming behind them, lights glowing warm in the windows, filled with family and love. And on the porch, Dominic and Grace Walsh sat together, hand in hand, hearts beating in rhythm after 44 years of marriage, proof that love sees beyond surfaces to the soul beneath. And that when two people choose each other every day, they can create something beautiful enough to last forever. The cowboy had married a woman no one believed in, and she had become his greatest strength. Together they had built a life, a family, a legacy. Together they had proved that real love transcends appearance, defies prejudice, and endures all trials. Together, they had shown the world what it means to truly see another person and to be seen in return. And as the Montana night deepened around them, filled with the sounds of family and the promise of another tomorrow, they knew with absolute certainty that every moment, every choice, every challenge had been worth it, because they had faced it all together.